Welcome, dear devotees, dear friends. We are continuing with our discussions on the internal dialogue, and now we have the last section of this chapter. This is from the Bhaktitirtha Maharaj's book, Spiritual Warrior 5. It's about making friends with the mind, I think. So here is some questions and Maharaj's answers. So question is, in this context, how do we understand the verse in the Vedic literature, Harinama, Harinama, Harinama iva kevalam, Kalau nastyeva, 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 gatir anyata. In this age of quarrel and hypocrisy, the only means of deliverance is chanting the holy name of the Lord. There is no other way, there is no other way, there is no other way. This is Brihad Naradiya Purana. You acknowledge that those on the path of Bhakti Yoga may need to look at their dysfunctional emotional state. In one sense, a person must consider it easier to not deal with such problems because they bring up so much pain. They would rather just chant the holy name, read the Bhagavad Gita, and follow this verse. How would you respond to this point? Answer by Bhaktitirtha Maharaj. For instance, we understand that chanting the holy name is the Yuga Dharma, or the most effective prescribed activity for this age, but that does not mean that we neglect prayer, vandanam, worship, archanam, remembrance, shravanam, and the other activities in the ninefold process of devotional service. We do say that the chanting is the way to achieve success in Kali Yuga, but it means that we must keep it as foremost as we engage in all of our other activities. For instance, if our deity service is not sheltered by the holy name, it then turns into idol worship. Similarly, we will not hear or read the scriptures deeply if we do not have a proper connection with the holy name. Chanting the holy name properly for full efficacy involves absorption in the complete science of Bhakti Yoga, especially avoiding the offenses or obstacles. Furthermore, Krishna clearly states, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. The Lord tells us that as we surrender, He rewards us accordingly. However, we need to look at the interferences which prevent our full surrender and decrease our ability to accept God as a loving personality. If my internal dialogue tells me that love does not exist, or that I am unworthy of receiving love, I will not be able to fully embrace these statements spoken by God Himself. I will not allow His words to fully enter into my consciousness. We understand that Krishna gives the medication, but how do we accept it and take it fully? Certain obstacles can prevent us from taking advantage of the gifts that He makes available or cause us to move more slowly towards the goal. Question: are there any other ways of changing our perceptions? It seems that changing our faulty perceptions will help us realize that we are not alone and that the Lord actually loves us. In terms of changing our perceptions, forgiveness plays a very important role because grudges cause a good deal of stagnation. For this reason, in my recent travels through Croatia, Malaysia, Russia, England, and so on, I often gave workshops on forgiveness. I gave examples of different acharyas and sadhus who underwent attack or abuse, but elevated the other person. Sometimes the attack came from their own karma, but we want to understand how they used it to look closer at a situation and understand more about the other person. Along with forgiveness, we must also develop a sense of compassion for ourselves as well for others. For example, a father might carry an unhealthy dialogue with him due to a negative situation from his own past. However, if he wants to be more loving with his own children, it might help him to look closer at his own issues. In this way, he can try to be more available for his son or daughter. This means that we have to find ways to be more effective in the present, which will allow us to give and have more concern and love for our associates. It will help us develop forgiveness and compassion for those in our immediate environment as well as for ourselves. Someone who suffers from depression and phobias will constantly be limited in their ability to help and give love to those in their presence. They will not be able to bring the best of themselves into any situation. If they are not careful, their actions will then be transmitted to the consciousness of their children, and their children will begin to develop the same internal dialogues as well. Another way to change these perceptions involves our reaction to an issue. After we confront a problem, we must now find a healthy way to react. In some cases, it requires a very distinct action. Such as talking to the mother who knew about the abusive father but who did not attempt to stop the abuse. Some people may actually have to address the issue so that they can get rid of it and walk away from the past. We will not go deeper into it at this point because it also depends on specifics as well as general considerations. But in general, it requires forgiveness, compassion, and proper action. The most important requirement is replacement. Even after evaluating the situation and practicing forgiveness, the internal dialogue will only change temporarily unless we replace that negative energy with positive, auspicious activities that will absorb the mind, body, and the senses. Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehinaha rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. The embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, though the taste for sense objects remains. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste. He is fixed in consciousness. So this positive absorption will reduce the tendency to revert to old patterns, because although we may have moved away from the past patterns, the seeds of sin still remain. Once we pull out the weed, we have to go deeper to take out the root of the weed so that it will not come back. For this reason, alcoholics can remain abstinent for many years, but then suddenly revert to the addiction when they feel weak or bewildered. Then they return to their comfort zone, since it previously gave them some shelter, fulfillment, and stimulation. After returning to the alcohol, the same internal dialogue begins once again, and the same old tape begins to play. Most people in the world are dealing with these issues, and as Kali Yuga progresses, in just these next few years we will see this problem increase more and more on the planet. People are distinctly having more mental challenges due to the abuse of Mother Bhumi or Mother Earth, because the abuse of natural resources is constantly creating more general mental pollution. As more people have mental challenges, those problems will spill over into the environment and in turn affect many more people. Even if we somehow do not have any of these issues in our lives, we must still be careful due to the nature of the environment. If we enter an environment in which many people have the flu, we may feel fortunate that we do not have the virus, but we must still be careful since the germs permeate the atmosphere. We are not simply addressing dysfunctional patterns from the past, we are also looking at ways to fortify and strengthen ourselves so that we will not acquire additional dysfunctional patterns in the future. Another question: if someone in your environment has a problem, how much do they affect you and how much do they affect you and the other people in the environment? Just ask any householder or even any brahmachari or renunciate. If your roommate is angry, untidy, or stays up all night while you try to sleep, it will definitely affect you. Similarly, when a man and woman live together, their anxieties, fears, distress, and happiness will constantly affect the other person to various extents. As a brahmachari or a householder, the condition of the person who you care about will affect you very directly. Any state of their mind, such as anger or happiness, will affect you because you share some similar space, physical, psychological, and spiritual. If you take your spiritual life very seriously, but your partner abuses alcohol or does not read and chant, it will make your own sadhana much more difficult. On the other hand, if you both want to hear from the scriptures, when you come home from work, you can honor your meal together and then read, which will help both of you accelerate in spiritual life. Another question. Someone might be afraid to address the many different emotional scars that they carry, not only from this lifetime, but from many different lifetimes as well. What do you recommend for a person with this type of fear? Answer. First of all, we really do not have to go back to previous lifetimes. we should simply understand that our past lives influence our current life. A person studying in a university does not necessarily need to go back to primary school, but they realize that their previous education definitely has an effect on their present situation. In most cases, we can barely remember all the details from our childhood, what to speak of previous lifetimes. However, we do have to deal with the many obstacles that influence us now. And according to our ability, we can research certain outstanding experiences in this lifetime that have made impressions on us. After we identify these experiences, we can try to address the issues. For instance, we may wonder how we can advance if we have to constantly think about all the different 64 offenses which Srila Rupa Goswami explains in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. We can commit so many types of aparadhs or offenses, such as offenses against the Guru, offenses against the holy places of pilgrimage, offenses against the devotees, the holy name, and during service. Even if we try, we will not be able to analyze all these details. However, it is not our duty to get into such minute details and rules. We have the general principle, and by opening ourselves up, we will experience the benefits from the general principle. God comes in at this point. He is in the heart and is giving us knowledge, remembrance, and also forgetfulness. However, although the Supreme Lord gives us the knowledge, we still have to act. Krishna gave Arjuna the necessary instructions, but Arjuna still had to make his own decision to act. Krishna gives us so many instructions about the dangers of the mind and the manifestation of lust in the body. He tells us to always think of Him, but now we have to also decide how to act. We should not just think that we will succeed through faith alone and then disregard works or effort. The mercy comes in association with effort. However, it is easier said than done. Therefore, one should humbly pray, "Dear Krishna, this task is beyond me. Please help me and let me become a better servant." The materialists who try to use their own analytical abilities and function on their own strength will eventually get frustrated because at some point their own endeavors will simply not work out for them. Although we do not want to just depend on our own minute abilities, we also do not want to remove ourselves from action and just expect the mercy to somehow fall from the sky. For this reason, the Acharyas give us many details. They teach us to recognize the nature of a sadhu so that we can become sadhus ourselves and take shelter of them. The scriptures constantly provide us with guidelines to check ourselves. The idea is to develop a greater sense of humility. When we have more humility, these obstacles will no longer seem so difficult because we will really want to act properly and find ways to become better servants. Then the Lord will guide us and give us more facilitation to deal with our issues. In some cases, God will guide us to a person who can help us, and we should see this help as His guidance. Question. Thank you for discussing a subject that is so necessary for us to look at and strive to understand. My understanding of the quality of forgiveness is that it is necessary because it is a quality of the heart that allows us to approach the idea of love. We have come to a process that involves the highest love, but if we cannot embrace or understand the quality of forgiveness, we become stuck in the cycle of continuous reactions. By understanding this positive quality of forgiveness, we can really embrace the issues that seem to block us and accept the betrayals simply because we have taken birth in this material world. These setbacks and attacks will happen, but when they happen, we should have the ability to apply forgiveness in that situation and dissipate the betrayal. Answer. Living in the material world means that people will make mistakes, bhrama, fall into illusion, pramada, cheat others, vipralipsa, and possess imperfect senses, karanapatava. Sometimes we will find ourselves on the receiving end of some of those mistakes, illusions, or betrayals. We cannot fully avoid this fact. At some point, all people will experience these devastating experiences in some form. However, we must ask ourselves how long we will continue to fear the betrayal. First of all, if we continue to carry it without forgiving, it means that we allow that person to constantly attack us again and again. Secondly, it means that we do not allow ourselves to move sufficiently into the present or future. Thirdly, it means that we are holding on to the duality which will prevent us from transcending the problem. Finally, we cannot develop sufficient love or allow Krishna to be more active in our hearts if anger and grudges cover our hearts. We may even want the other person to also experience a betrayal or some type of pain. Then we need to ask ourselves how much pain we want the other person to experience before we can release them. We can look at the pastimes of the different acharyas in our line, because many of them were also betrayed, disappointed, attacked, and misunderstood, but they did not harbor grudges or come down to that level. We want to forgive others because we want to be forgiven. Just as we deal with people who have betrayed or disappointed us, we have also betrayed or disappointed people in our own lives. We also have hurt, wounded, or disappointed people. Therefore, since we want to be forgiven, we want to forgive others. Finally, we must also forgive ourselves. Some people carry such unhealthy dialogues because they have made some bad choices or have gone through some bad events, but they will not forgive themselves. Consequently, they cannot move into new aspect or chapter of their lives. In a spiritual sense, it is just another way of playing God. We can play God in a grandiose mood by thinking ourselves to be wonderful like God Himself, or we can play the role of God through self-pity and lamentation so that we place the past and the wound in the center of our lives. Some people convert their wounds or mistakes into the enthroned deity in their minds and hearts. As long as these mistakes remain enthroned on the altar of our hearts, how will we allow God to enter? As we dethrone these other useless deities that have acted as substitutes for our connection with the Divine, we will then have room for our real worshipful deity, God. Remember that the greatest worship never just involves the externals, rather it is the internal that accesses a deeper spirituality. Therefore, healthy internal dialogue is not optional, it is a necessity for a rich spiritual life. Thank you very much for listening.